Whispers of a world of culture. Mongolia. Where the sky meets the eternal steppe. A sleep story and cultural journey. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine standing in the middle of an ocean, not of water, but of grass. In every direction, as far as your vision reaches, the land rolls and breathes in long, unhurried waves. The sky above is enormous, wider and higher than any sky you have known before, a vast bowl of blue so pure and deep it feels almost weightless. There is wind here, always, moving through the grasses with a sound like the turning of a page. And beneath your feet, the earth is ancient, patient, and alive. This is Mongolia. Welcome, gently, to one of the most extraordinary landscapes on earth, a country of staggering scale and gentle solitude, where the horizon is always far away and the silence, when it comes, is total. Mongolia sits at the heart of Asia, landlocked between Russia to the north and China to the south, sharing its vast interior with no coastline and no river that reaches the sea. And yet there is nothing closed about this place. It feels, if anything, like the most open country in the world. As we begin this long, slow journey together, there is no need to rush. Let the sounds of this landscape come to you in their own time. Imagine the low whistle of wind passing across the steppe, the distant sound of horse hooves on dry earth, the tinkling of a bell on a yak somewhere over the next rise. Imagine the smell of the air, clean and cold, carrying traces of wild thyme and dry grass, and sometimes, from across the plain, the thin curl of wood smoke from a fire inside a jar. Mongolia's geography is one of the most varied and dramatic on the Asian continent. In the north, the land climbs toward the forests of the taiga, where pine and larch grow thick and tall, and where rivers run cold and fast between mossy banks. This northern belt shares something of the Siberian temperament: deep winters, long springs, and summers that are brief but luminous. The Kovsgol Lake lies here, one of the deepest and most pristine freshwater lakes in the world. Its waters are blue so intense they seem lit from beneath. In winter, the lake freezes solid enough to carry the weight of vehicles, and the ice surface reflects the pale gold of the January sun in sheets of cold fire. Moving south and east, the land opens into the Great Steppe, the heartland of Mongolia, and perhaps the heartland of Mongolian identity itself. This is the land of the nomads, of the horse and the eagle, of the ger and the open sky. The steppe here rolls in vast, gentle undulations, broken occasionally by rocky outcroppings called tors, by dry riverbeds, and by the scattered herds of horses and cattle that move across the grass like slow clouds. In early summer, the steppe blooms with wildflowers, yellow and purple and white, and the air is thick with the hum of insects. Later in the season, the grass dries to gold and the landscape takes on the tones of warm bread, of old honey, of the sun at the end of its day. To the south and southwest, the steppe gives way, gradually, to the Gobi, one of the world's great deserts, and perhaps its most misunderstood. The Gobi is not a desert of sand dunes, though there are dunes here, the great singing dunes of Congrinels, which hum in the wind with a low, resonant note that travelers have called haunting and beautiful. The Gobi is mostly a desert of stone and gravel, of vast flat plains and sudden rocky canyons, of saxaul trees and wild camels and the fossil bones of dinosaurs embedded in the red canyon walls at Bayanzarg, a place known to paleontologists as the Flaming Cliffs for the way the red rock seems to glow at sunset. In the west, the Altai Mountains rise in a long, serrated spine, their highest peaks permanently snow-capped, their valleys deep and shadowed. This is the land of the Kazakh eagle hunters, a people who have maintained, across many generations, the ancient art of hunting with golden eagles. Here, in the high valleys and on the rocky slopes, the relationship between human and bird takes on a quality that feels less like ownership and more like partnership. Two beings sharing a landscape, learning from one another, depending on one another through the long, cold months of winter. Mongolia's climate is one of extremes, continental in the most absolute sense. Winters here are among the coldest in the world outside of the polar regions, with temperatures in Ulaanbaatar regularly falling to -30 and below, making it one of the coldest capital cities on Earth. And yet the summers can be genuinely warm. The steppe in July is green and alive, the light long and golden, the air carrying warmth from the sun-warmed earth. Spring and autumn are brief, transitional seasons, spring blowing in on cold winds that bring sudden snow and then sudden warmth in the same week, autumn arriving in a blaze of color before the temperature drops sharply and the land prepares, once more, for the silence of winter. It is perhaps the sky, above all, that defines the Mongolian landscape in the imagination. The Mongolian word for the sky, tanga, is also the word for heaven, for the divine, for the eternal blue. The sky here is not a backdrop but a presence, a vast, breathing companion to all human activity below. Nomadic peoples have always looked to the sky for weather, for direction, for meaning. In Mongolia, this relationship between earth and sky, between the human and the infinite, has shaped culture, spirituality, and daily life for thousands of years, and it continues to shape them still. In the quiet rhythm of everyday life, Mongolia moves to rhythms that have been established over many centuries. The seasonal migrations of nomadic families, moving with their herds to summer pastures and back to more sheltered winter grounds, follow patterns laid down long before any written record. The skills required for this life, horsemanship, the reading of weather, the care of animals, the assembly and disassembly of the GER, are passed from parent to child with quiet, patient care. Even in the 21st century, with its roads and mobile phones and satellite dishes on the steppe, these rhythms persist with a remarkable continuity. Mongolia's national identity is deeply connected to this landscape and this way of life. To be Mongolian, in the deepest sense, is often described through the lens of the steppe, the open land, the free movement, the kinship with animals, the hospitality of the GER. And yet Mongolia is also the heir to one of the greatest empires the world has ever known, an empire that, at its height, stretched from the Pacific to the edges of Eastern Europe, connecting civilizations, enabling trade, and reshaping the political geography of the medieval world. This dual inheritance, the intimate, nomadic, and the enormous, imperial, gives Mongolian identity a particular depth and complexity that we will explore gently throughout this long journey together. As we gently move through time in this documentary, we will follow this layered story with care and quiet attention. We will ride across the steppe and sit inside the warmth of a GER while the wind moves outside. We will taste the food and hear the music. We will follow the prayers and the festivals and the seasons, tracing the long, patient story of a people who have lived in one of the world's most demanding landscapes and have made from it something extraordinarily beautiful. For now, simply rest here at the edge of the steppe. Imagine the first light of morning spreading across the grass, the dew still on the blades, the horses standing quiet in the cool air, a child outside the GR watching the horizon with calm, open eyes. The day is beginning, slowly, gently, as days have begun here for 1,000 years and more. This is Mongolia, and we have only just begun. History in Mongolia does not always sit in stone buildings or archived manuscripts. It lives, often, in movement, in the migration of families across the steppe, in the lineages traced through oral tradition, in the names of mountains and rivers and the stories attached to them over centuries. To understand Mongolian history is to understand a history that unfolded largely in the open air, under that vast, eternal blue sky. Let us begin at the beginning, or as close to it as our knowledge reaches. Long before the word Mongolia existed as a political entity, the lands of the Central Asian steppe were home to a succession of pastoral nomadic peoples. The Xiongnu, the Xianbei, the Rouran, the Turk, each rising and falling in the cycles of history, each leaving traces in the gene pool and the cultural memory of the region. The steppe is not, as it might appear to the casual eye, an empty landscape. It is a landscape saturated with history, layered with the movements of human beings who have passed across it for at least 40,000 years. The story that most resonates in the Mongolian consciousness, and most resonates in world history, begins in the late 12th century with the birth of a boy in a small clan near the Onon River. His name, at birth, was Temujin. The circumstances of his early life were difficult. His father was poisoned by enemies when Temujin was still a child, and the family was abandoned by their clan, left to survive alone on the steppe with the skills and the will to endure. What followed was a life of extraordinary hardship and extraordinary determination. Through years of alliance building, warfare, and negotiation, Temujin gradually united the warring Mongol and Turkic tribes of the steppe into a single, coherent force. In 1206, at a great gathering of chieftains on the banks of the Onon River, a gathering known as the Great Kurultai, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The Mongol Empire had begun. Across centuries, the story of what followed is one of the most dramatic in human history, and yet there is something in the Mongolian telling of it that carries not conquest's pride alone, but also a sense of the weight such power brings. The Mongol armies moved with a speed and discipline that their enemies could not match. They had mastered the tactics of the steppe, the swift cavalry raid, the feigned retreat, the encircling maneuver. City after city, kingdom after kingdom, fell before them. China, Persia, Central Asia, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, the Mongol wave swept through them all. And yet the empire that Genghis Khan founded was not only a military phenomenon. It created, in the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability across the Eurasian landmass during which trade flourished along the Silk Road, ideas and technologies moved between East and West, and cultures that had been isolated from one another came into contact. The Mongol court was notably tolerant of different religions. Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, and shamans all found a place within the empire's administration. This pragmatic openness to diversity was, in many ways, ahead of its time. After Genghis Khan's death, the empire was divided among his sons and grandsons into a series of successor states: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in the Russian steppes. His grandson Kublai Khan, who completed the conquest of China and established the Yuan dynasty, became famous in the West through the account of Marco Polo, whose descriptions of the Mongol court at Kambalik, modern Beijing, remain among the most vivid documents of medieval cross-cultural encounter. The Mongol Empire, as a unified whole, did not last beyond the 14th century. The successor states fragmented, converted to the religions of their subjects, and were gradually absorbed or overthrown. On the steppe itself, the Mongol homeland, the period after the empire's collapse was one of gradual fragmentation. A return, in many ways, to the clan-based, nomadic structure that had preceded Genghis Khan's unification. The centuries that followed saw periods of internal conflict and external pressure, from the Ming dynasty of China, from the Manchu Qing dynasty that eventually extended its authority over the Mongolian lands in the 17th century. Through quiet resilience, Mongolian culture persisted through these centuries. The traditions of the steppe, the ger, the horse, the music, the oral epic, continued to be practiced and transmitted, quietly and continuously, even as political authority passed to outside powers. The great epics of the Mongols, the secret history of the Mongols, the Gezer epic, were preserved in memory and manuscript, carried forward by storytellers who understood that a people's identity lives not only in its political structures but in its stories and its songs. In the 20th century, the political landscape shifted dramatically. The Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911, and Mongolia declared its independence. The years that followed were turbulent. The country came under the influence of the Soviet Union, and for most of the 20th century, the Mongolian People's Republic existed as a Soviet satellite state. This period brought significant changes. Collectivization disrupted traditional nomadic patterns, industrialization and urbanization grew, and the literacy and education system was transformed. The Cyrillic alphabet replaced the traditional Mongolian script in daily use, though the old script was never entirely forgotten. In 1990, as the Soviet bloc dissolved, Mongolia made a peaceful transition to democracy and a market economy, a transition that is sometimes called the Democratic Revolution. The old script began to be taught again in schools. The celebration of Nadam, the great traditional festival of the three manly sports, was reinvigorated as a statement of national identity. The nomadic way of life, though changed by modernization, retained its deep prestige in the national imagination. Over generations, the Mongolian people have carried their history with a particular quality of pride, not a loud or aggressive pride, but a quiet, deep assurance of who they are and where they come from. The face of Genghis Khan appears on the banknotes, on the largest hotel in Ulaanbaatar, on the hillside overlooking the capital. He is not only a historical figure here, he is a symbol of possibility, of the idea that from the open steppe, from a people who carried their homes on their backs, something vast and transformative can arise. As we gently move forward in our journey, we carry this history with us, not as a weight, but as a kind of quiet foundation beneath our feet. Mongolia's story is long and layered, and it continues to be written, day by day, across the extraordinary landscape of the steppe. In the next hours, we will explore the culture that has grown from this history, the language, the beliefs, the food, the art, and we will try to understand, softly and without hurry, what it means to be Mongolian in this deep and continuing sense. If you listen closely to the Mongolian language when it is spoken at an ordinary pace, in an everyday conversation, you begin to notice something particular about its sound. It is a language with a certain depth to it, consonants that resonate in the chest, vowels that open and round in the mouth, a rhythm that seems unhurried even when the speaker is animated. It is not, as languages go, a sharp language. It is a language that rolls, that gathers, that moves across the ears the way a river moves over smooth stones. Mongolian belongs to the Mongolic branch of the Altaic language family, and it shares certain structural features with other languages of the Central Asian steppe, Turkic languages, Tungusic languages, and, according to some linguistic theories, even Korean and Japanese, though these distant connections remain a matter of scholarly discussion. What is not disputed is that Mongolian is an ancient language with a rich and distinctive tradition, a language that has been used to compose law codes and epic poetry, to record genealogies and diplomatic correspondence, to sing of the steppe and the sky for many hundreds of years. The traditional Mongolian script, sometimes called the Old Mongolian script or Hudum Mongol Bishig, is one of the most beautiful writing systems in the world. It runs vertically, from top to bottom, in columns that read from left to right. The script was adapted from a Yugur writing system in the 13th century, during the time of Genghis Khan, and it has a flowing, cursive quality, the letters connected and curving, the overall appearance of a page of traditional Mongolian script resembling something between calligraphy and the flowing patterns of a textile. During the Soviet period of the 20th century, the traditional script was largely replaced, in everyday use, by the Cyrillic alphabet, a change that brought literacy to a wider population but also created a kind of distance from the written heritage of earlier centuries. Since the 1990s, there has been a conscious revival of the traditional script, which is now taught in schools alongside Cyrillic, and which carries a strong symbolic charge, a connection to the great era of the Mongol Empire, to the manuscripts of the secret history, to the long line of scribes and scholars who worked in this flowing vertical hand. The spoken language of today's Mongolia is Khalkha Mongolian, the prestige dialect and the basis of the standard language, though there are other dialects and closely related languages spoken by Mongolian communities in Inner Mongolia and in various diaspora communities around the world. The sounds of Khalkha include some features that are distinctive and, to ears accustomed to European languages, quite striking. In particular, the system of vowel harmony, whereby the vowels in a word belong to one of two harmonic groups, and suffixes and affixes adjust to match the vowel quality of the root word. This creates a particular musical coherence within words, a sense that the sounds of a word belong together, that they are tuned to the same key. Mongolian is also an agglutinative language, a language that builds words and expresses grammatical relationships by adding a series of suffixes to a root word, rather than by using separate prepositions or changing word order dramatically. The result is that Mongolian words can become quite long and dense with meaning, and that a single word might carry, in its suffixes and particles, information about time, direction, cause, possession, and the speaker's relationship to the information they are conveying. It is, in this sense, a language with a deep grammatical texture, a language that rewards careful attention. The vocabulary of Mongolian reflects the landscape and the way of life that shaped it. There are many, many words for horses of different colors, different ages, different gaits, different temperaments. There are precise words for the different parts of the GER, for the different kinds of grass on the steppe, for the different kinds of weather that come across the open plain. The sky, tanga, is not only a physical phenomenon but a spiritual one, and the language treats it with a corresponding richness and care. In the quiet of everyday conversation, Mongolian is a language of warmth and indirectness. Direct confrontation or blunt refusal can feel uncomfortable, and Mongolian speakers often prefer to express disagreement or difficulty in ways that preserve the harmony of the interaction. There is a culture of hospitality embedded in the language itself, the greetings that ask about the well-being of the herds, the conventional phrases that welcome a guest, the forms of address that show respect for elders and for guests. If we listen closely to these exchanges, we begin to hear in them a social philosophy, a way of moving through the world that values connection and gentleness over efficiency or bluntness. Some of the most beautiful expressions in Mongolian are connected to the natural world. Imagine asking someone how they are and receiving, in response, a description of the state of the pastures, whether the grass is good, whether the animals are fat and well. This way of speaking connects the well-being of the person to the well-being of the land and the herd in a single, fluid gesture. It is a reminder that in a nomadic, pastoral culture, the health of the environment is not separate from the health of the individual. They are one and the same thing. Mongolian oral tradition is extraordinarily rich. The epic poetry of the Mongols, the great cycles of story and song that include the Epic of Giza, one of the longest epic poems in the world, was carried for centuries by specialist performers called tulchi, who could recite tens of thousands of lines from memory, varying the performance, improvising ornaments, and responding to the audience with the skill and sensitivity of a musician. These performances were not mere recitations. They were events, participatory and alive, binding the community together through the shared experience of story. The throat-singing tradition, known in Mongolian as kumei or humiai, is one of the most remarkable sonic arts in the world. A single singer produces multiple simultaneous pitches, creating chords from within a single human body, a sound that seems, to those hearing it for the first time, to come from somewhere between the human and the non-human, to belong simultaneously to a person and to the landscape they inhabit. The different styles of humiai, kagira, swaj, kumei, each produce a different texture and resonance, from the deep, buzzing drone of kagira to the high, flute-like whistle of swaj. To hear it performed outside, on the steppe, with the wind and the grass around you, is an experience that is very difficult to describe and very easy to feel. Over generations, language has been the great carrier of Mongolian culture, the medium through which history, belief, practical knowledge, and aesthetic vision have been transmitted from one generation to the next. In a culture that has relied heavily on oral transmission rather than written record, the care and artistry with which language is used carries a particular weight. Words, in this context, are not merely instrumental. They are also ceremonial, relational, and spiritual. The right words, spoken in the right way, at the right moment, can hold a community together, welcome a stranger, honor the dead, or call down the blessing of the sky. As we move gently forward in our journey, we carry with us the music of this language, the rolling consonants and the harmonic vowels, the vertical script flowing like a river from top to bottom of the page, the epic verses and the throat-singing resonance. Language, in Mongolia, is not simply a tool for communication. It is, itself, a kind of landscape, one that the people of this country have inhabited, shaped, and been shaped by, across the long centuries of their extraordinary history. At the heart of daily life in Mongolia, there is a quality that is difficult to translate into a single word but that becomes unmistakable once you have spent time in the country. It is something like a combination of resilience, self-reliance, and deep hospitality. A particular way of being in the world that has been shaped by centuries of life in a demanding landscape, far from the supports of settled civilization. It is, perhaps, the quality that nomadic life cultivates in those who practice it long enough and honestly enough. A quiet confidence in one's own ability to manage, combined with an equally quiet understanding that no one manages entirely alone. In many homes across the Mongolian steppe, the family is the fundamental unit of life, not only the nuclear family, but the extended family, the clan, the lineage. Mongolian family structures carry deep traces of the tribal organization that has characterized life on the steppe for millennia. Elders are honored and consulted. Children are raised within a web of relationships that extends well beyond the immediate parents. The care of aging family members is considered a natural responsibility, not a burden, part of the reciprocal fabric of life that holds everyone together across the years. Often, you will find that the values of Mongolian family life center on a kind of practical love, a love expressed not primarily in words but in action, in the care given to animals, in the preparation of food, in the maintenance of the GER, in the teaching of skills. A father teaching his young child to ride a horse, a mother showing a daughter how to felt wool, a grandmother passing on the words of a prayer or a song. These are the moments in which love is expressed and values are transmitted, quietly, in the doing rather than the saying. Hospitality, in Mongolian, zoklog togtul, or simply the practice of welcoming guests, is not merely a social nicety in Mongolia. It is a moral imperative, a value so deeply embedded in the culture that to refuse hospitality to a traveler would be understood as a serious failing of character. The tradition of hospitality on the steppe has a practical dimension as well as a moral one. In a landscape this vast, this unpredictable, and this demanding, the ability to rely on the hospitality of strangers in times of need is a matter of survival. The warmth of the welcome given to any visitor to a GER, the immediate offer of tea, of irag, of food, reflects this deep understanding of mutual dependence. The relationship to animals is another area in which Mongolian values reveal themselves with particular clarity. The 5 primary livestock animals of the Mongolian herde, horses, cattle, sheep, goats, and camels, are not merely economic assets. They are companions, sources of identity, objects of pride, and in a certain sense, members of an extended family. The herde knows each animal individually, its temperament, its habits, its health. A horse is not just a horse, it is a specific being with a specific personality, and the relationship between a Mongolian herde and their horses is one of the most culturally resonant relationships in the entire country. The concept of nutag, homeland, native land, the place one belongs to, is central to Mongolian identity in a way that goes beyond simple national feeling. Nutag is the specific landscape one comes from, the particular valley, the particular mountain, the particular river. A Mongolian person asked where they are from will often describe their nutag in terms of its natural features, its animals, its seasonal character. This deep attachment to a specific piece of earth, combined with the nomadic practice of moving across that earth with the seasons, creates a relationship to place that is both intimate and expansive, both rooted and free. Work ethic in Mongolia is shaped by the demands of the pastoral life. The work of the nomadic herde is not a 9-to-5 occupation, it is a continuous engagement with the needs of the animals and the conditions of the land, a work that intensifies in certain seasons and relaxes in others, but never entirely ceases. The skills required, horsemanship, veterinary knowledge, meteorological reading, felt making, GER assembly, are numerous and deep, and acquiring them takes years of patient practice. There is a great respect in Mongolian culture for practical competence, for the person who can do things well with their hands and their body in the real world. At the same time, there is a strong tradition of intellectual and spiritual aspiration in Mongolian culture. The great monasteries of the Buddhist tradition, before many were destroyed in the repressions of the 20th century, were centers of learning, philosophy, and art. The scholar-monk who mastered Sanskrit or Tibetan texts, the scribe who copied manuscripts in the beautiful traditional script, the storyteller who carried the epic cycles in their memory, these figures were held in high esteem in the community, as necessary and as valued as the skilled herde. Views on success in Mongolia tend to be measured in terms of communal well-being as much as individual achievement. A successful person is one whose herds are healthy, whose children are raised well, whose community is strong. Individual wealth that is not shared, individual success that comes at the expense of others, these are not the ideals of the steppe. The reciprocal obligations of clan and community place a gentle check on purely self-interested accumulation. A person who gives generously, who hosts well, who helps neighbors in difficulty, who contributes to the community, is a person of high standing. In the soft fabric of tradition, there is also a deep respect for the non-human world. The animist roots of Mongolian spirituality, which we will explore more fully in the section on religion and belief, inform an attitude toward nature that is not one of domination but of relationship. The mountain is not merely terrain, it is a presence, perhaps a spirit, deserving of respect. The river is not merely water, it has a life and a mood that the observant herder learns to read. The weather is not merely meteorology, it is a communication from the sky that requires attention and interpretation. This attentiveness to the non-human world extends into the daily practices of Mongolian life in ways both large and small. The herder who moves their camp does so with an awareness of the land's capacity, not taking more than the land can give, not overgrazing a pasture, not disturbing a sacred mountain. The food taboos and ritual practices that govern hunting and herding reflect this same ecological sensibility, an understanding, earned over many centuries, that the health of the human community depends on the health of the living systems that surround and sustain it. Over generations, these values, hospitality, family loyalty, respect for elders, love of animals, attentiveness to the land, communal generosity, have shaped a culture of remarkable warmth and depth. They are values that have been tested by some of the most demanding conditions on Earth and have proven, again and again, their capacity to hold a community together through long winters and uncertain seasons. They are not merely cultural values, they are survival values, elevated over time into something beautiful. As we move gently forward in our journey, we carry these values with us as a kind of lens, a way of understanding everything else we will encounter in Mongolian culture. The food, the music, the rituals, the social norms, all of these are, in their different ways, expressions of the same underlying orientation toward the world. Humble, open, resilient, and deeply alive to the relationship between the human and the everything that surrounds it. If there is a single image that captures the spiritual life of Mongolia, it might be this: a lone ovu on the crest of a hill, a cairn of stones and branches, wrapped in blue prayer scarves, standing against the enormous sky. Around it, the grass moves in the wind. No human figure is near, and yet the ovu does not feel lonely. It feels attended to, held in place by something larger than stone and cloth, something that has no name in any ordinary language but that the traveler feels, standing at that hilltop, looking out across the plain. Mongolia's spiritual life is a layered and deeply beautiful weaving of two great traditions: shamanism, perhaps the oldest spiritual practice known to humanity, and Tibetan Buddhism, which arrived in Mongolia in the 13th century and became the dominant religious tradition by the 16th. These two traditions coexist and interpenetrate in Mongolian religious life in ways that are sometimes in tension but more often profoundly complementary, a dual inheritance that gives Mongolian spirituality its distinctive character. Shamanism, in Mongolian, called Bo for male shamans and Udgan for female shamans, is rooted in the ancient conviction that the world is inhabited by spirits. The spirits of ancestors, the spirits of animals, the spirits of mountains, rivers, trees, and winds. The shaman is the intermediary between the human world and this spirit world, a specialist in crossing boundaries, in communicating with presences that ordinary people cannot easily perceive, in healing the illnesses and disruptions that arise when the relationship between human community and spirit world is out of balance. The shaman's tools are the drum, the headdress, and the costume, objects that are themselves understood as alive with spiritual power, collected and cared for across years of practice. The drum, in particular, is considered both a vehicle and an instrument of communication, its rhythm an invitation and a pathway. When the shaman beats the drum in the context of a ritual, they are not merely making music, they are opening a door, traveling to regions of experience that lie beyond the ordinary, bringing back knowledge and healing for those who have gathered and who wait. The landscape itself, in the shamanic worldview, is alive with meaning. Every significant natural feature, The great mountains, the ancient trees, the river bends, the rocky outcroppings, may be the home or the manifestation of a spirit. These spirits, called ongans, ovus, or various other names depending on region and tradition, are not gods in the Western theological sense, but they are presences deserving of respect and relationship. Offerings of milk, of irag, of food and cloth are made at ovus, the stone cairns that mark spiritually significant places, as acts of acknowledgement and thanks. Buddhism arrived in Mongolia in waves, beginning with contact during the Mongol Empire period and deepening significantly in the 16th century when Altan Khan met the third Dalai Lama, an encounter that initiated a profound religious transformation. The great monasteries of Mongolia, Erdene-Zu, built at the old capital of Karakoram, Ganden Kayed in Ulaanbaatar, the smaller monastery complexes scattered across the steppe, became centers of learning, healing, and artistic production. By the 20th century, there were estimated to be hundreds of monasteries across the country and thousands of monks. The Buddhism practiced in Mongolia belongs to the Vajrayana school, the same tradition practiced in Tibet, Bhutan, and among certain Himalayan communities. It is a form of Buddhism that is rich in ritual, in sacred imagery, in the practices of visualization and mantra, in the elaborate artistic tradition of thangka paintings and sand mandalas and ritual music. The great masked dances of the Zam tradition, performed at monasteries on sacred calendar days, are among the most visually spectacular religious performances in the world. Brightly costumed figures embodying enlightened beings, moving in prescribed patterns to the sound of drums and horns and cymbals. The Soviet period brought severe disruption to both of Mongolia's great spiritual traditions. Monasteries were closed or destroyed, monks were imprisoned or killed, and the practice of religion was suppressed. Shamanic traditions were similarly persecuted. Yet both traditions survived, sustained in family memory, in private practice, in the continuity of knowledge passed quietly from elder to younger. When the Soviet period ended and religious freedom was restored, there was a remarkable revival. Monasteries were restored and rebuilt, the practice of shamanism underwent a public resurgence, and a younger generation began exploring the spiritual traditions of their ancestors with curiosity and commitment. In the soft fabric of everyday religious life in contemporary Mongolia, Buddhism and shamanism often coexist comfortably within the same family, sometimes within the same person. A family might visit a Buddhist monastery for blessings at the new year, consult a shaman when an illness proves difficult to understand or treat, and maintain a small household shrine that combines Buddhist icons with photographs of ancestors and offerings to the spirit of the family lineage. This pragmatic spiritual eclecticism, the willingness to draw from multiple traditions based on circumstance and need, reflects a deeply Mongolian quality: the openness, the flexibility, the orientation toward what works. The ritual year in Mongolia is marked by a series of significant moments. Buddhist festivals aligned with the Tibetan lunar calendar, the great national celebration of Tsagaan Sar, White Month, at the New Year, the solstice and seasonal observances that connect back to the older shamanic calendar. Tsagaan Sar is perhaps the most important of these, a celebration that combines Buddhist ritual with the ancient practices of hospitality and family reunion, filling the ger with visitors, with booze, steamed dumplings, with irag and blessings and the renewal of kinship bonds at the turning of the year. Prayer flags, the colorful cloth banners printed with prayers and sacred symbols, are found throughout Mongolia, tied to trees, to ovus, to the tops of mountain passes. The wind that moves through them is understood as carrying the prayers outward into the world, distributing blessings across the landscape. This idea, that the wind is a spiritual medium, that the movement of air across the steppe carries something of the divine, is deeply Mongolian, connecting the physical reality of the landscape to the invisible world of spirit in a single, elegant gesture. If we listen closely to the spiritual life of Mongolia, we begin to hear in it a conversation, a long, ongoing conversation between the human community and the world that surrounds it. The ovu on the hilltop, the prayer flag in the wind, the shaman's drum in the night, the monk's prayer at dawn, these are all different voices in the same conversation, all attempts to maintain the relationship between the seen and the unseen, between the human and the vast, between the small and the eternal. As we move gently forward, we carry this spiritual landscape with us, the blue of the sky that is also heaven, the stones of the ovu that are also a prayer, the drum that is also a door. Mongolia's religious life is not separate from its daily life. It is woven through it, present in the small gestures of offering and attention that punctuate the ordinary day with something extraordinary. In this, it offers a way of seeing the world that is both ancient and, in its attentiveness, endlessly fresh. In the soft fabric of tradition, the Mongolian people have woven a calendar rich with ceremony, celebration, and the quiet observances of daily life. These traditions are not museum pieces, they are living practices, adapted and renewed across generations, carrying the memory of the past into the texture of the present. To be present at a Mongolian celebration is to feel something that is simultaneously ancient and immediate, a continuity so deep it becomes almost physical, a sense of standing in a long, unbroken line of human beings who have done these things, in this landscape, for a very long time. Nadam, the festival of the three manly sports, is perhaps the most famous of Mongolia's traditional celebrations, and it is one of the most distinctive cultural events in Asia. Held in July, at the height of the summer, Nadam features competitions in the three sports that have defined the culture of the steppe warrior for centuries: wrestling, horse racing, and archery. The Ulaanbaatar Nadam is the national event, with the largest competitions and the most elaborate ceremonies, but smaller Nadams are held in every amag, province, and in many sums, districts, across the country, making it a genuinely national celebration. Mongolian wrestling, bok, is a sport of great elegance and deep ritual significance. The wrestlers wear distinctive costumes, a jacket with short sleeves and an open chest, short shorts, and heavy boots, and they wrestle in an open field, without a ring, without a time limit. A wrestler loses when any part of their body above the knee touches the ground. The ceremony surrounding the bouts is as important as the competition itself. The victory dance, the eagle dance, arms spread wide, the blessing of the victorious wrestler by the referee, the oral proclamation of the winner's titles. The horse racing of Nadam is not a short sprint around a track but a cross-country race over distances of 15 to 30 kilometers, ridden by children between the ages of 5 and 13. The young jockeys ride with extraordinary skill and courage, often without saddles, dressed in bright colors, their faces bent low over the horse's neck. The horse that wins is celebrated as much as the rider. It is the horse's name that is called out, the horse that receives the first offering of irag. After the race, the winning horse is praised in a traditional poem, a piece of oral literature that celebrates the animal's strength, speed, and beauty in language that is both formal and deeply felt. Archery has an equally ancient place in Mongolian tradition, and the Nadam competitions test both accuracy and range, with targets, small woven cylinders called surs, arranged in lines on the ground rather than on vertical targets. The form of the Mongolian composite bow, a recurve bow of extraordinary power, made from layers of horn and wooden sinew, is one of the technological achievements of the steppe, and the skill of the archer is a matter of great pride. Women as well as men compete in archery at Nadam, and the traditional costumes worn by the archers, the long deal, the traditional Mongolian garment, in various regional styles, add to the beauty of the spectacle. Tsagaan Sar, White Month, or Mongolian New Year, is the most intimate and family-centered of the great celebrations. Falling in late January or February according to the lunar calendar, it marks the end of the hardest part of winter and the first stirrings of renewal. In the days before Tsagaan Sar, families clean their ger or home thoroughly, prepare enormous quantities of food, especially booze, the steamed dumplings that are the festival food par excellence, and make ready for a period of visiting and being visited. On the morning of Tsagaan Sar, before sunrise, family members dress in their finest deal and perform a ritual greeting of the New Year's first dawn, walking in the direction of the auspicious stars. Then begins the visiting, a structured series of calls on relatives and respected elders, beginning with the oldest and most senior. Each visit follows a protocol of greeting, offering, and receiving that is understood by everyone and that carries, in its formality, both respect and warmth. The host family offers the guest a tiered plate of arul, dried curds, and other dairy products, and presents the guest with the shagai, ankle bones, and snuff bottle in a ritual exchange of gifts and blessings. The ger itself is the site of many of the most significant life rituals of Mongolian culture. Birth, marriage, and death are all marked by ceremonies that take place within or in close connection to the ger. When a child is born, the ger is decorated and a celebration is held on the third day, the day when the child is first officially presented to the community. The child is named, blessed, and welcomed into the family and clan. The first haircut of a child, at around age 3 or 5, is another significant ceremony, with family members cutting a small lock of hair and offering gifts and blessings. Mongolian weddings are elaborate, multi-day ceremonies that bring families and communities together in celebration. The rituals surrounding a Mongolian wedding, the negotiation between families, the exchange of gifts, the procession, the setting up of the new couple's ger, have evolved over centuries and reflect the values of the culture. Family loyalty, communal generosity, the importance of the new household as a social unit. The wedding feast features traditional music, traditional food, and the kind of warm, slightly rowdy hospitality that is one of Mongolia's great social gifts. The treatment of death in Mongolian tradition reflects the spiritual understanding that the individual life is part of a larger cycle. Buddhist and shamanic elements combine in funeral practices that aim to ease the passage of the deceased into the next stage of their journey, to honor their memory among the living, and to manage the grief of the family in a way that is both emotionally real and spiritually grounded. The days following a death are filled with ritual, prayers, offerings, the recitation of sacred texts, and the community gathers around the bereaved family with food, support, and the quiet solidarity of shared presence. Seasonal customs mark the rhythm of the pastoral year with their own ceremonies and observances. The first milking of the mares in late spring, a moment of great practical significance, as it marks the beginning of the irag making season, is celebrated with ritual offerings and community gathering. The autumn butchering, the preparation of meat for the long winter months ahead, is similarly a communal activity, carried out with both practical efficiency and ritual awareness. Even the seasonal movement of the camp, the dismantling of the ger and the loading of the animals for the journey to new pastures, has its proper protocols, its correct order of packing, its small observances that mark the transition from one season's home to another. Over generations, these traditions have proven their capacity to hold time together, to create points of shared meaning in the flow of the year, moments when the community gathers and recognizes itself, when the past speaks through the present, when the individual life is placed, with care and with ceremony, in its proper relationship to the larger whole. They are not simply customs. They are, in the deepest sense, the practices by which a people sustains its sense of who it is. As we move gently forward in our journey, we carry with us the images of these ceremonies, the wrestlers dancing their eagle dance in the summer sun, the young jockeys leaning over their horses' necks in the long, open race, the family gathered around the table at Sagan Sar in their best deal, the ger filling with warmth and laughter and the smell of booze. These images are not from a distant past, they are from the living present of a people who know the value of what they carry. Imagine stepping through the low doorway of a ger on a cold Mongolian evening. The transition from the sharp cold outside to the warmth within is almost physical in its completeness. The heat of the stove wraps around you like a welcome, and the smell of something slow-cooked and deeply savory fills the air. Your host is already moving, reaching for cups, for the pot on the stove, for the offerings of the dairy shelf, and before you have even found a place to sit, you are holding a bowl of warm, milky tea and a piece of dried curd, and the conversation has begun. Mongolian cuisine is, at its heart, a cuisine of survival and hospitality. A food culture that developed in response to the demands of nomadic life on the steppe and that has been refined, over many centuries, into something that is both practical and deeply satisfying. The central ingredients are meat and dairy, specifically, the products of the 5 primary livestock animals: horse, cattle, sheep, goat, and camel. These 2 categories, the red foods, meat, and the white foods, dairy, structure the food culture in a fundamental way, with the white foods of summer and the red foods of winter creating a seasonal rhythm to the table. The white foods, Tsagani day, are the foods of warmth and abundance, of the season when the animals are giving milk and the steppe is green. Irag, fermented mare's milk, is perhaps the most emblematic of all Mongolian foods, a mildly alcoholic, slightly fizzy, distinctly sour drink that is simultaneously a food, a beverage, a medicine, and a social ritual. Making irag is a communal activity. The mare's milk is collected twice a day and added to a large leather bag, then churned vigorously, traditionally, by anyone who enters the GER, as a gesture of participation and hospitality, until it ferments to the desired consistency and flavor. A GER in summer smells of irag, and the sound of the churning is one of the characteristic sounds of the season. Alongside irag, the dairy shelf of a Mongolian GER holds an impressive variety of preserved milk products. Arul, dried curds, pressed into various shapes and dried in the sun until they are rock hard, are the great snack food of the steppe, long-lasting, portable, and intensely flavored. They are the food that a herder puts in their pocket before riding out for the day. Urim is the thick, clotted cream skimmed from boiled milk, spread on bread or eaten alone. It has a richness and a sweetness that is deeply comforting. Byaslag is a fresh cheese, mild and soft, eaten at the table or used in cooking. Each of these products represents a technology of preservation developed over centuries, a way of capturing the abundance of the milking season and extending it into the leaner months. The red foods, Ulani day, come into their own in autumn and winter, when the animals are slaughtered and the meat is prepared for the cold months ahead. Mutton is the most important meat. The fat-tailed sheep of the Mongolian breed is highly valued for its rich, distinctive flavor and the quality of its fat, which is used in cooking and as a calorie-dense source of warmth during cold weather. Beef and horse meat are also eaten. Horse meat has a particular prestige in the culture, associated with the honored status of the animal, and is reserved for significant occasions and honored guests. Booze, steamed dumplings filled with minced mutton and onion, seasoned simply with salt and pepper, are perhaps the most beloved of all Mongolian foods, and they appear at almost every significant occasion. The making of booze for Tsagan Sar is a family undertaking that can last for days, with hundreds or even thousands of dumplings prepared in advance to feed the stream of visitors. The technique of folding booze, the specific shape, with its gathered pleats at the top, is considered an art, and experienced cooks take quiet pride in the evenness and elegance of their folds. Kushu, fried dumplings, similar in filling to booze but sealed in a flat, crescent shape and cooked in hot oil, are the nadam food, sold from stalls across the festival grounds and eaten standing up, wrapped in paper, still crackling hot from the pan. The smell of kushu frying is inseparable from the memory of nadam, the way certain smells become permanently associated with certain occasions, carrying memory in their molecules. Suavan, a noodle dish of hand-stretched noodles fried with mutton and vegetables, is the everyday comfort food of Mongolian cooking, the dish that appears most often on the family table and that most Mongolians, when asked about their favorite food, will name with a kind of instinctive warmth. The noodles in Suavan are made fresh, stretched by hand into flat, wide ribbons, then steamed before being fried with the meat, a technique that gives them a particular texture, slightly dense and satisfying, that is deeply characteristic of Mongolian food. Mongolian tea, Sute Tsai, milk tea, is the drink that underlies everything. Made by boiling green tea bricks with water and adding generous amounts of milk, then salt, it is thick and warming, closer to a soup than to the delicate infused teas of other cultures. It is the first thing offered to any guest, at any time of day or night, and the refusal of tea would be a significant social misstep. The salt in the tea surprises visitors expecting sweetness, but within a few days on the steppe, it begins to taste completely right, the salt and fat of the milk tea providing exactly what the body needs in a cold, dry, physically demanding environment. Cooking methods in traditional Mongolian cuisine are simple and direct. The most interesting, and the most distinctly Mongolian, is perhaps the korkog, a method of cooking meat using hot stones. Stones are heated directly in a fire until they are intensely hot, then placed inside a sealed metal container with pieces of meat and vegetables. The steam from the small amount of water in the container, combined with the intense, dry heat of the rocks, cooks the meat from the inside and outside simultaneously, producing a result that is astonishingly tender and deeply flavored. The hot stones are passed from hand to hand at the end of the meal, considered beneficial for circulation and health, a gesture that combines the practical, warming the hands, with the ritual, sharing the heat of the cooking stones as an act of communal participation. Food in Mongolia is not merely sustenance, it is relationship, it is hospitality, it is care made visible. To offer food to a guest is to offer yourself, your home, your resources. To eat together is to affirm a connection. To share the irag bowl, passing it around the circle of those gathered in the GER, is to participate in something old and good, an act of communal life that has been performed in this landscape for countless generations. In the warmth of the GER, with the wind outside and the stove glowing inside and the tea hot in your hands, the food of Mongolia tastes like exactly what it is, a civilization built by people who knew how to care for each other in a beautiful, demanding world. Over generations, the food culture of Mongolia has been shaped by the landscape and the way of life that the landscape requires. It is not a cuisine of abundance for its own sake, nor of the elaborate preparations made possible by settled agriculture. It is a cuisine of intelligence and care, of people who have learned, through long experience, what the body needs and how to provide it with what is available, seasonally and locally, in ways that sustain both the individual and the community. Its simplicity is not a limitation, it is a form of wisdom. Every culture builds, over time, an invisible architecture, a set of shared understandings, unspoken rules, and conventional behaviors that allow people to move through the world together with a minimum of friction and a maximum of mutual care. In Mongolia, this invisible architecture is particularly fascinating to observe, because it reflects, in such clear and coherent ways, the values of the nomadic pastoral life from which it grew. To understand the social norms of Mongolia is, in a sense, to understand the practical philosophy of the steppe. The GER, the traditional circular dwelling, is the primary social space of Mongolian life, and it has its own internal geography that encodes social meaning. The door of a GER faces south, toward the sun. The honored position, the place of the guest of honor, the elder, the respected visitor, is the northernmost point of the GER, directly opposite the door. Men typically sit on the western side, women on the eastern. The space around the stove, at the center, is common ground. To cross from one side to the other without circling around the outside of the stove is considered improper. These conventions, observed without being explicitly stated, create a spatial map of social relations that everyone in the community reads and navigates as naturally as breathing. When entering a GER, there are conventions that speak to the visitor's relationship with the space and its inhabitants. One enters through the low door with the right foot first, a small gesture of respect and auspiciousness. One does not step on the threshold. The threshold of a GER has a spiritual significance, and to step on it is considered disrespectful. Inside, one moves clockwise, following the sun's direction. These small physical observances accumulate into a way of inhabiting space that is attentive and considerate, a physical practice of mindfulness, one might say, in the everyday geography of the home. The offering and receiving of objects is governed by similar conventions. Gifts, food, and drinks are offered and received with the right hand, or with both hands. To offer something with the left hand alone is considered impolite. When offering something to an elder or a respected guest, the right arm may be supported at the elbow with the left hand, a gesture that adds an element of ceremony and respect to the simple act of passing something from one person to another. These conventions of gesture speak a language that everyone understands, and their presence in ordinary social interactions creates a consistent undercurrent of formality and mutual respect that runs through daily life. Respect for elders is one of the most fundamental norms of Mongolian social life. Elders are dressed with formal language, offered the best seats, served first at meals. Their opinions and advice are sought and genuinely valued, not as a formal gesture of deference but from a real conviction that accumulated experience is worth more than it is often given credit for in younger-oriented cultures. The care of aging parents and grandparents within the family is not outsourced. It is considered a natural and honored responsibility, one of the ways in which the value of care is passed reciprocally through the generations. The concept of honor, and its obverse, shame, operates as an important regulator of social behavior. To behave in a way that reflects badly on one's family and clan is a serious matter. To behave in a way that honors them is a source of pride and motivation. This collective dimension of honor, the understanding that one's actions reflect on a group, not only on oneself, creates a particular kind of social accountability that functions without the need for explicit enforcement. The awareness of others' perceptions, and the desire to be seen as honorable, shapes behavior in countless small ways throughout the day. Time in Mongolia, particularly on the steppe and in more traditional settings, is experienced and organized somewhat differently than in the clock-driven, schedule-bound cultures of the urban West. The nomadic life follows the rhythms of the animals, the seasons, and the weather, rhythms that are real and demanding but not easily expressed in the language of appointments and schedules. Visitors from cultures with a more rigid relationship to time sometimes find the Mongolian approach to time relaxing, even liberating. The understanding that the visit will take as long as it takes, that the meal will be ready when it is ready, that the journey will begin when the conditions are right. In social interactions, directness is modulated by a strong concern for harmony and face preservation. Disagreement, criticism, or bad news is typically communicated indirectly. Through suggestion, through the use of intermediaries, through the timing and context of the communication. A direct challenge or public confrontation would be considered, in most circumstances, rude and counterproductive. This indirectness is not deceptiveness. It is a social technology for managing conflict without unnecessary escalation, for preserving relationships that, in a nomadic community, may need to last a very long time. The role of gender in Mongolian social life is, like so many aspects of the culture, shaped by the practical requirements of the nomadic life. Both men and women in the herding life have essential and demanding roles, the man's role more often involving the management of the herd and the physical work of the outside, the woman's role centered on the management of the GER and the processing of food and dairy products. These roles are different, but each is understood as necessary and valued. The family and community cannot function without either. In practice, the boundaries between these roles have always been more permeable than any simple description suggests, with individuals adapting to the needs of circumstance. In contemporary Mongolia, particularly in Ulaanbaatar, social norms are evolving as urban life introduces new configurations of family, work, and community. The formal structures of the traditional GER community exist alongside the more individualized patterns of city life, apartment buildings, office work, cafes, and restaurants, the rhythms of school and business. Young Mongolians move between these worlds with remarkable fluency, shifting registers as the context requires, maintaining the traditional forms of respect and hospitality while also navigating the demands and pleasures of a globally connected urban life. In the quiet rhythm of everyday social life, what is most striking about Mongolia is perhaps the consistency of warmth, the genuine pleasure in human connection that seems to persist across contexts and generations. Whether in the formal visit of Tsugan Sar or the chance encounter on the steppe, whether in the city apartment or the remote GER, there is a quality of welcome and interest in the other person that is, in the deepest sense, a social norm, a shared commitment to treating each encounter as an opportunity for genuine human contact. Over generations, these norms have served the Mongolian people well, providing the social glue that holds together a widely dispersed nomadic community across a vast and demanding landscape, creating the conditions for cooperation, trust, and mutual care that make life not merely survivable but genuinely rich. They are not constraints on individual freedom. They are, rather, the very medium through which individual freedom becomes possible, the shared understanding that allows each person to move through the world with confidence, knowing what to expect and how to be received. Imagine a figure moving across the steppe on horseback, at the end of a summer afternoon. The light is long and golden, the grass is bending in the wind, and the rider is wearing a deal, the traditional Mongolian garment, in a deep burgundy silk that catches the light and moves with the body's movement, flowing back slightly from the shoulders. At a distance, the figure and the landscape seem to belong to each other completely, the color of the garment echoing the colors of the earth, the movement of the fabric echoing the movement of the grass. This is the deal in its element. The deal is the central garment of Mongolian traditional dress, a long, wraparound robe with a distinctive cut and closure that has been refined over many centuries of use in the pastoral nomadic context. It wraps across the chest from right to left, fastening with a series of buttons at the right shoulder and side, creating a closure that is both secure and adjustable. The high collar, the wide sleeves, and the generous length all serve practical functions, protecting the neck from cold and sun, allowing the arms to move freely in the work of herding and riding, covering the legs when the wearer is on horseback. The variety of deal styles across Mongolia is remarkable, reflecting the different regional traditions, ethnic identities, and occasions for which different deals are appropriate. The Khalkha deal, the most commonly seen style, has a subtly different cut and ornamentation from the Buryat deal of the north, or the Kazakh coat of the west, or the Buryat ceremonial dress. The materials range from heavy wool and cotton for everyday winter wear to silk and brocade for festivals and celebrations, the latter fabrics carrying the light and the color that transform the wearer and signal the occasion. Color in the Mongolian deal tradition carries significant meaning. Blue, the color of the eternal sky, of Tanga, of the spiritual principle that governs the cosmos, is a prestigious and sacred color, particularly associated with ceremonies and with the costumes of wrestlers and ritual performers. Red carries associations with fire, with life, with celebration. Orange and yellow are associated with Buddhism, often used in the robes of monks and in ceremonial contexts. The white of dairy, the black of mourning, the green of summer growth. Each color has its place in the spectrum of social and spiritual meaning, and the person choosing their deal for a particular occasion is choosing not only a garment but a statement. The sash, the bus, is an essential component of the traditional Mongolian outfit, worn tied around the waist of the deal. For men, the sash is tied at the front. For women, it may be worn differently, and is often made from a contrasting color that adds a note of brightness and definition to the silhouette. The sash has practical functions, holding the deal closed over the body, creating a waistline that makes riding and physical work more comfortable, but it also carries symbolic and social meaning. The way a sash is tied and worn can indicate region, age, and status. The Mongolian hat, malgai, is another important element of traditional dress, with a variety of styles suited to different seasons, occasions, and regions. The winter hat of the herder, with its long flaps that can be tied under the chin or folded up depending on the temperature, is a practical triumph, warm, adjustable, and deeply characteristic of its context. The summer hats, lighter and often made from silk or cotton, have a more formal elegance. The traditional rounded top hat with upturned brim, often seen in historical paintings and in ceremonial contexts, has a distinctly Mongolian form that is instantly recognizable. Boots, gutul, complete the traditional outfit, and like the deal and the hat, they exist in a range of styles suited to different purposes and occasions. The traditional Mongolian boot has a distinctive turned-up toe, a feature that has both practical and symbolic explanations. Practically, the turned-up toe helps when riding, fitting more easily into a stirrup. Symbolically, it is said to prevent the wearer from harming the earth with their step, reflecting the deep Mongolian respect for the natural world. The boots are made from thick leather, often with a felt inner lining, and they are built for the conditions of the steppe, warm, durable, and comfortable across long days of walking and riding. The decorative arts of Mongolian traditional clothing, the embroidery, the applique, the metalwork of the fastenings and ornaments, are themselves a significant artistic tradition, one that has been sustained and refined over many generations by skilled craftspeople working within a distinctive aesthetic vocabulary. The patterns used in Mongolian decorative arts are geometric and symbolic, endless knot patterns, cloud patterns, flame patterns, the ulzi or eternal knot, and they appear not only on clothing but on the painted surfaces of the ger, on carpets and wall hangings, on the carved wooden elements of furniture. The craftsmanship of the deal involves skills that are passed within families and communities. The cutting, the sewing, the choice of lining, the making of the closures. A well-made deal, cut and sewn by an experienced hand from good materials, is a garment that will last for years and that will be worn with pleasure and pride. The process of making a deal for a family member, calculating the fabric, cutting and assembling the pieces, adding the decorative elements, is an act of care, an investment of skill and time that expresses love in a particularly tangible and enduring form. In contemporary Mongolia, the relationship between traditional and modern dress is fluid and context-dependent. Most urban Mongolians dress in global contemporary fashion for their everyday lives, the jeans and jackets and shoes that are worn in cities around the world. But for significant occasions, nadam, tsagan sar, weddings, formal events, and increasingly simply for the pleasure of it, the deal is worn with evident pride and care. There is a movement in contemporary Mongolia to renew and celebrate the traditional textile arts, to document the regional variations, to teach the skills of making and decorating the deal to younger generations, to encourage the wearing of traditional dress not only on special occasions but in everyday life. This movement reflects a broader cultural dynamic, the desire to maintain a living connection to the distinctive visual culture of the steppe, to keep the beauty of the traditional forms present and active rather than relegating them to museums. Over generations, Mongolian clothing has been a portable cultural library, a way of carrying, on the body, the values, the aesthetics, and the identity of a people in movement across a vast and beautiful landscape. The deal, with its generous cut and its deep colors, is not simply clothing. It is a statement of belonging, of continuity, of the particular beauty that has been developed in this particular place. To put on a deal is, in some sense, to wear a piece of history, to wrap yourself in the long story of the steppe and to carry it forward into the present. There is a moment in the performance of a mooring kur, the horse-head fiddle, when the music seems to leave the instrument and enter the landscape itself. The bow draws across the two strings, and a sound emerges that is both deeply human and deeply not. A sound that seems to carry the memory of the steppe, the movement of horses, the long, open distances. It is a sound that makes something in the listener grow quiet and attentive, as though the body recognizes, at some level beneath language, what the music is saying. The horse-head fiddle, named for the carved horse head that crowns its neck, is the central instrument of Mongolian musical culture, and it is also, in a very real sense, a symbol of Mongolian cultural identity. Its two strings, traditionally made from horsehair, produce a rich, resonant, slightly rough tone that is immediately distinctive. The instrument is used in virtually every context of Mongolian musical life, from the intimate solo playing of a herder on the steppe to the formal orchestral ensembles of the concert hall, from the accompaniment of epic poetry to the scoring of films and theatrical performances. The music played on the mooring kur spans an enormous range of styles and purposes. There are the long songs, du, which are perhaps the most characteristic form of traditional Mongolian vocal music. Long songs are not long because they last a long time, though they often do, but because their vocal line is extended and ornamented, each syllable drawn out into a long, elaborate phrase, the voice ranging widely across its register, the ornamentation creating a melody that seems to breathe and expand with the landscape. Long songs are typically performed solo, without fixed meter, the voice moving freely in response to the internal logic of the emotion and the image. Alongside the long song is the short song, du, which is rhythmically more defined, often accompanied by the mooring kur or other instruments, and more social in character. Short songs are the songs of celebration, of work, of everyday life. They are sung at gatherings and festivals, on the road and in the ger, by groups and by individuals with equal ease. The topics of short songs range widely: love, nature, homeland, horses, the seasons, the experience of being young and alive on the steppe, and the tone ranges from joyful to tender to gently melancholic. Humiai, throat singing, is, as we have already noted, one of Mongolia's most extraordinary artistic achievements. It is an art form that seems to push at the boundaries of what the human voice can do, producing, through precise control of the vocal tract, multiple simultaneous pitches that create complex harmonic structures from within a single body. The different regional styles of Humiai, Kovsgol, Zavkan, Western Mongolian, produce different timbres and use different techniques, and the mastery of each style takes years of dedicated practice. Throat singing is both a performance art and, in certain contexts, a spiritual practice. Some practitioners describe the state of deep throat singing as a form of meditation, a way of entering into relationship with the resonances of the landscape. The epic tradition, the great oral poetry cycles that include the Epic of Giza and the other heroic narratives of the Mongolian literary heritage, is another dimension of the artistic life of the culture that is difficult to fully convey to those who encounter it only in translation. In its living form, the epic is not a fixed text but a performed event. The Tulchi, the specialist epic performer, drawing on a vast memorized repertoire while simultaneously improvising and adapting the telling to the audience and the occasion. The language of the epic is heightened and formal, a special register of Mongolian developed specifically for this purpose, full of kennings and epithets and rhythmic formulas that have been refined over centuries of use. The visual arts of Mongolia encompass a rich range of traditions, from the ancient rock carvings found across the steppe, to the paintings and sculptures of the Buddhist monastic tradition, to the distinctive applied arts of the nomadic culture. The Thangka paintings produced in the great monasteries, images of deities, teachers, and sacred diagrams executed in mineral pigments on prepared cloth, represent one of the highest achievements of Buddhist art in Central Asia, combining extraordinary technical precision with deep contemplative intention. The decorative arts of the nomadic culture, the patterns on the ger, the embroidery on the deal, the metalwork of the horse's tack, the painting on the wooden furniture, form a coherent visual language developed over centuries in response to the specific aesthetic and practical needs of the mobile life. These arts are not, in the Mongolian understanding, less serious or less significant than the fine arts of the monastery or the concert hall. They are simply arts practiced in a different context and in response to different requirements. The woman who embroiders the cuff of a deal is doing something as culturally significant as the painter who creates a thangka. Both are transmitting, in their different media, the visual memory and the aesthetic sensibility of the community. Dance has its place in Mongolian cultural life, most visibly in the BLG, a traditional form of dance that originated among the Oirat and Kalmyk peoples of the western regions. BLG is performed sitting down or while kneeling, with the movements concentrated in the upper body, the arms, the torso, the hands. It is a dance that can be performed in the confined space of the GER, and it is said to represent the daily life and work of the nomadic herder. The movements of milking, churning, riding, and caring for animals translated into a formalized, expressive physical language. Literature, in the Mongolian tradition, has always had a strong oral dimension, with the written tradition developing alongside and in relationship to the oral. The Secret History of the Mongols, written in the 13th century, the oldest surviving literary work in the Mongolian language, is a text of extraordinary richness and complexity, combining historical chronicle with epic poetry and shamanic incantation in a way that reflects the literary culture of its moment. The Secret History was so carefully guarded that it was long known to outsiders only through a Chinese translation, the Mongolian original surviving in only a few manuscripts, treasured as one of the great documents of Central Asian civilization. Contemporary Mongolian art encompasses a wide range of practices: painting, sculpture, film, literature, performance, and digital media. Mongolian cinema has produced works of genuine international significance, exploring the tensions and resonances of contemporary nomadic and urban life. Contemporary painters draw on both traditional Mongolian imagery and the wider influences of global art to produce work that is distinctively of its place and time. Writers in contemporary Mongolia engage with the great themes of change and continuity, memory and identity, the steppe and the city, in a literature that is still finding its full voice in the post-Soviet period but already showing remarkable vitality. If we listen closely to the art of Mongolia, in all its forms, from the ancient to the contemporary, we begin to hear a consistent preoccupation: the relationship between the human and the landscape, between the individual life and the vast, impersonal beauty of the sky and the steppe. This preoccupation is not a limitation but a source of endless creative energy, a central question that each generation answers in its own way, with its own voice and its own medium, adding its contribution to the long, ongoing conversation between the people of the steppe and the world they inhabit. Every society builds, over time, systems for organizing collective life, for making decisions, resolving disputes, distributing resources, educating the young, and caring for those who need care. In Mongolia, these systems have been shaped by a particularly interesting combination of forces: the ancient traditions of steppe nomadic governance, the administrative legacy of the Great Mongol Empire, the significant transformations of the Soviet period, and the democratic institutions built since 1990. The result is a social order with a distinctive character, one that reflects both a long history and a remarkable capacity for adaptation. The traditional governance structure of the Mongolian steppe was organized around the concept of the amag, the clan or tribal group, led by a khan or chief whose authority depended on a combination of lineage, military skill, and the consent of the community. Major decisions were made collectively at the Kurultai, a gathering of leaders, a form of consultative assembly that has its echoes in the contemporary parliamentary system. The great Genghis Khan legitimized his authority not through simple hereditary succession but through the formal consent of the gathered chiefs, and this consultative principle has deep roots in Mongolian political culture. The Mongol Empire created, in its administrative innovations, some of the most remarkable governance systems of the medieval world. The Yosa, the great law code attributed to Genghis Khan, established a legal framework that applied across the empire, covering everything from military discipline to the treatment of merchants to the rights of religious minorities. The Mongol postal system, the Yam, created a network of relay stations across the empire that allowed messages and envoys to travel thousands of kilometers with remarkable speed. These administrative innovations reflected a genuine genius for organization and communication at a scale that had never previously been attempted. The Soviet period of the 20th century transformed Mongolia's social systems in profound ways. A centralized state replaced the traditional clan-based structure. Collectivization reorganized the nomadic pastoral economy into large state herding enterprises. A universal education system was established, raising literacy rates dramatically and creating a new professional class. Healthcare, infrastructure, and social welfare systems were built across the country, reaching populations that had previously lived entirely outside any institutional support. The education system established during the Soviet period, and substantially reformed since 1990, has given Mongolia one of the highest literacy rates in Asia, a foundation of educated citizens that has supported the country's democratic transition and its engagement with the wider world. The curriculum in contemporary Mongolian schools includes the traditional script alongside Cyrillic, traditional culture and history alongside global subjects, and there is a growing awareness in the education system of the importance of connecting modern education to the specific cultural heritage and values of the Mongolian people. Mongolia's government today is a parliamentary republic, with an elected legislature, the state Great Khural, and a directly elected president. The 1992 constitution, adopted after the democratic transition, enshrines the fundamental rights of citizens, the independence of the judiciary, and the principles of democratic governance. Mongolia's democratic transition was notably peaceful, accomplished through mass demonstrations and negotiated change rather than violent conflict, and the country has maintained a functioning multi-party democracy for more than 3 decades, a remarkable achievement in a region with a mixed democratic record. The legal system combines elements of the socialist legal tradition with constitutional principles and customary law. There has been significant effort, particularly since the democratic transition, to align Mongolian law with international standards in areas including human rights, environmental protection, and anti-corruption measures. The challenge of corruption, endemic in many post-socialist states, has been a persistent concern, and civil society organizations, independent media, and international partnerships have all played roles in pushing for greater accountability. The economy of Mongolia is shaped by two great forces: the pastoral nomadic tradition and the country's extraordinary endowment of natural resources. Mongolia is among the most resource-rich countries in the world per capita. It has enormous deposits of coal, copper, gold, and other minerals, as well as significant oil and gas reserves. The development of these resources has brought significant economic growth, particularly since the early 2000s, and has also brought the challenges and tensions that large-scale extractive industries create in many developing economies. Questions of environmental impact, distribution of benefits, and the relationship between rapid economic change and traditional ways of life. The nomadic pastoral economy, the herding of livestock across the steppe according to seasonal patterns, remains an important part of Mongolia's economic and cultural life, even as urbanization has concentrated more than half the population in Ulaanbaatar and other cities. Approximately a quarter of the Mongolian population still lives the nomadic or semi-nomadic life, and herding remains the primary livelihood of many rural communities. The cashmere wool of the Mongolian goat, among the finest in the world, has created a significant export industry, linking the ancient economy of the steppe directly to the global fashion market. Social welfare in Mongolia is a blend of state systems, health insurance, pension systems, child support programs, and the traditional networks of family and community mutual aid. The extended family network remains a crucial safety net for many Mongolians, particularly in rural areas where state services are less accessible. The tradition of hospitality, the obligation to feed and shelter those who come to one's door, functions, in this context, not only as a cultural ideal but as a practical system of social support that complements and sometimes substitutes for formal welfare structures. Environmental law and policy have become increasingly important in Mongolia as the scale of mining development has raised concerns about the long-term health of the steppe ecosystem. Traditional Mongolian values, the deep respect for nature, the understanding of the landscape as a living entity deserving of care, provide a cultural foundation for environmental awareness, and these values have found expression in a growing environmental movement that draws on both modern science and traditional knowledge in advocating for the protection of the steppe, the waterways, and the biodiversity that sustains the pastoral way of life. Over generations, Mongolia has navigated some of the most dramatic social and political transformations of the 20th century. From the colonial periphery of the Qing Empire to a socialist state to a functioning democracy engaged with the global community, while maintaining a remarkable degree of cultural continuity. The gyar still stands on the steppe, the deal is still worn at celebration, the mooring kur still plays at the edge of evening. The systems that organize collective life have changed enormously. The deep values that animate those systems have proven remarkably resilient. As we move gently toward the close of our journey, we carry with us the image of a society navigating change with the same quiet pragmatism that has always characterized the Mongolian people, adapting the form while preserving the spirit, finding new expressions for ancient commitments, building new institutions on the foundation of old values. This is a living country, in motion, finding its way forward across an uncertain landscape with the patient, attentive skill of a herder reading the weather across the open steppe. As night settles over the steppe, the stars come out in a quantity and clarity that is, the first time you see it, almost overwhelming. There is no light pollution on the open plain, the nearest town is far away, its glow invisible at this distance, and the sky, which by day seems so vast and blue and empty, reveals at night that it is anything but empty. The Milky Way arches from horizon to horizon, a river of light so dense and detailed that you can see individual star clusters with the naked eye, can trace the dust lanes and the bright nodes, can feel, in a way that city living rarely permits, the genuine scale of the universe in which this small planet spins. And below that sky, the gyar glows from within, warm orange light through the felt walls, the shadow of a figure moving inside, the faint sound of music, perhaps, or voices, or just the quiet breathing of the stove. The horses stand near the GER with their characteristic stillness, their shapes dark against the stars. The grass is cool and damp with night dew. The air is clean and cold and carries the smell of the earth. Everything is very quiet, and the quiet is not emptiness but presence. The presence of a landscape that has been home to human beings for an immeasurably long time and that carries, in its grasses and its stones and its enormous sky, the memory of all that living. This is what Mongolia leaves in the heart of those who encounter it with open attention, a kind of recalibration. The usual scales of things, the usual measures of importance and urgency, shift slightly when held against the scale of the steppe. The ordinary anxieties of daily life become, briefly, smaller. The things that are genuinely large, the sky, the time, the long continuity of human care in the face of cold and distance, become, briefly, more visible. It is a gift that Mongolia offers freely to any traveler who comes to it with curiosity and patience. In the quiet rhythm of everyday life, Mongolians move between the demands of the present and the weight of the past with a particular ease. The herder who rides out in the morning to check the animals is doing something that has been done in this place for thousands of years, and they know it, in some non-verbal but deeply felt way, and it gives what they are doing a kind of depth and meaning that purely novel activities rarely possess. To be doing what your parents did, and their parents before them, and their parents before them, back through the long reach of time, this is a form of belonging that goes beyond the personal and touches something genuinely ancient and sustaining. And yet Mongolia is not a country frozen in the past, or anxious to remain there. The young people of Ulaanbaatar, navigating the digital world, traveling abroad, building careers in fields that did not exist a generation ago, are not less Mongolian for their modernity. They carry their culture with them into the new contexts with a fluid confidence, wearing their deal on special occasions with pride, speaking their language with care, maintaining their family ties and their respect for elders even as they engage fully with the wider world. The tension between tradition and modernity, where it exists, is often creative rather than destructive, a generative friction from which new forms of culture, new ways of being Mongolian, are constantly being developed. If we listen closely to the soul of Mongolia, we begin to hear what connects all the things we have encountered in this long journey. The landscape and the culture, the language and the food, the music and the ceremonies, the social norms and the governance systems. What connects them is, at its core, a particular orientation toward the world, an orientation of attentiveness and resilience, of openness and rootedness, of care for the community and wonder at the cosmos. This orientation is not a doctrine or a philosophy articulated in formal terms. It is a practice, embodied in daily life and transmitted through the doing of ordinary things in particular ways, with particular attention, over the long accumulation of generations. The mooring kur plays at the edge of the evening. The sound moves out across the grass, rising on the wind, dissipating into the enormous air. It is a small sound against the scale of the landscape, and yet it is not overwhelmed. It holds its own. It is exactly right for where it is. This is, perhaps, one way of understanding the achievement of Mongolian culture, that it has learned, over centuries, to be exactly right for where it is, to develop forms and practices that are precisely calibrated to the demands and the gifts of this particular place on earth, this particular position in the long river of human time. The ovu on the hilltop catches the last light of the day, its blue prayer scarves lifting in the evening breeze. Each scarf was tied there by human hands, by someone making a gesture towards something larger than themselves, acknowledging the presence of the sacred in the ordinary landscape of the hill and the sky. The gesture is simple, but it carries a deep intention, the intention to be in relationship with the world, to notice the world, to honor what is beautiful and significant in it. This intention, quiet, persistent, expressed in small repeated gestures across the long years, is the heartbeat of Mongolian spiritual life, and it pulses gently through everything else. Over generations, the Mongolian people have faced the challenges of their landscape with the same qualities that we have been tracing throughout this documentary. Patience, adaptability, community solidarity, practical competence, and a deep capacity for beauty. The beauty of the music, the beauty of the clothing, the beauty of the GER's circular form and the painting on its wooden surfaces, the beauty of the long song's ornamented phrase, these are not luxuries added to a hard life. They are part of the life itself, inseparable from its substance, evidence of the human need not merely to survive but to make meaning, to create form, to add something of one's own to the world's supply of beauty. As we gently move toward the end of our journey together, let the images of Mongolia settle slowly into stillness. The steppe in early morning, the dew on the grass catching the first light. The family gathering at Sagan Sar, the bowls of tea and the tiered plate of our rule and the warmth of the greeting. The wrestlers moving in their eagle dance, arms spread wide in the summer sun. The young jockeys bent low over their horses' necks in the long cross-country race. The throat singer whose voice seems to hold, in a single human body, the resonance of mountains and rivers and wind. The child watching the horizon with calm, open eyes. These images are not separate from one another. They are all aspects of a single, coherent culture, a way of being in the world that has been developed with care and intelligence across an enormous stretch of time, in one of the world's most demanding and most beautiful landscapes. To have encountered this culture, even briefly, even at a gentle distance, is to have been touched by something genuine and deep. To have spent this time in the company of Mongolia's landscapes, its stories, and its people is to carry something away with you. Some small but real adjustment in the way you see the world, some memory of the steppe and the sky that will return, unexpectedly, at quiet moments. The spirit of Mongolia continues to breathe quietly through its people, its stories, and its timeless traditions. Through the Morin Kur and the deep song, through the turning of the GER door toward the morning sun, through the movement of the horses across the grass, through the prayer flags lifting in the wind above a mountain pass. It breathes through the long patience of the herder reading the weather, through the warmth of the host who offers tea before questions, through the child learning to ride for the first time with the same unhurried confidence with which children have learned to ride in this place for thousands of years. Now, let the sounds of the steppe grow gentle and distant. Let the wind move softly through the grass. Let the stars come out, one by one, over the wide open plain. Let the GER be warm. Let the horses stand quiet in the night. Let the music fade, slowly, into the enormous silence of the Mongolian sky, that sky which is, in the language of the people who have lived beneath it since the beginning of memory, not simply the sky, but heaven itself. Rest now. The journey has been long and slow and beautiful, as all the best journeys are. The steppe will be here when you return. The sky will be here. The GER will be warm. Mongolia waits, patient and vast and alive, beneath the eternal blue. Thanks for watching. What culture would you like to learn about next? Comment below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. See you on the next one.